Okay, thank you everybody and welcome to the Friends from the Field webinar. My name is Chrissy Allen and I'm the Development Director for Blue Hill Heritage Trust. And I'll do my best to sub in for Lander today, who is your usual host. We are really excited about this event. I'm going to give a little introduction and then pass it over to Lisa at IHT to do a little housekeeping. Today's webinar is all about the work that our two land trusts are doing every day. And we thought it would be a fun opportunity to have an audience to share with you some of the behind the scenes work that's happening. We invited our stewardship teams from the two organizations to join us because I think a lot of us, when we think about stewardship work for a land trust, we immediately think about trails and trail work and trail building and trail maintenance. But in fact, there's so much more going on with the stewardship work of these land trusts and sort of the day-to-day work behind the scenes work that's happening that you don't necessarily always know about. So we're here to share that information with you and answer any questions that you have. And we're joined by George Fields, who is the Associate Director of Blue Hill Heritage Trust and sort of the head of stewardship. Sandy Walczyk, who is our conservation forester at Blue Hill Heritage Trust, and Alex Drenga, who is the stewardship person for Island Heritage Trust. So I'll turn it over to you, Lisa, and then we'll get started.
Okay, great. Okay, my name is Lisa. I am the Outreach Manager at Island Heritage Trust. I am just going to run through some of our quick tech specifications. So for this webinar and all of our webinars, we use the chat feature and the raise your hand feature. So throughout the presentations, feel free to drop in any questions you may have for our presenters into the chat box. And then at the end of our presentation, Chrissy and I will come through them and read them out to our presenters to answer. And then we are also doing the raise your hand feature. So if you prefer to ask your question over audio, you can raise your hand. That's also at the bottom of the screen. And we will bring you in, unmute you, and you can ask your question there. That will also be at the end. And I will continue to monitor the chat to address any other tech questions you may have. And I think that about covers it. So do we want to get right into our presentations?
Yeah, I think we're going to have George Fields kick it off for us.
Awesome.
Right. Let me get rid of some of this other stuff. So glad everybody could come. Little slide here. I have a deck of about 12 slides. So my section will be really quick. We'll save it for the important stuff for Sandy and Alex to do. But I wanted to touch a little bit on trail work and you know, mainly go over the topics here that we're looking at. Let me see if I can, there we go. So I'll be talking about assessing the land, you know, if it's appropriate for trail, just give you a little bit of trail aspects of what we look at. A little brief introduction to assessing it, you know, discuss fragmentation, carrying capacity, trail design, you know, yada, 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 and also focus on leave no trace ethics and outreach. Sandy will be looking at some forest stewardship, managing both health and diversity and for long-term benefits on our larger parcels. And Alex is going to focus on factors affecting our shoreland properties and, you know, future planning for water resources and protection. So yeah, slide over here. So I need to get rid of this here. Go to speaker view here. So, you know, when we look at trails, you know, first off, we start off with just, you know, looking at the parcel in general and looking at it and saying, okay, what's special about this land? Are there areas that we should avoid that are too sensitive? Areas that can handle increased use? You know, have we completed a natural resource inventory that, you know, talks about water bodies, the geology, topography, you know, flora and fauna? You know, that all goes into, you know, where we want to put a trail and if we want to put a trail on the land. One case scenario that I typically present is looking at our Kingdom Woods property here in Blue Hill, 878 acres. It's hemmed in by 3 roads for the most part, and it's further divided by a north-south trail. You can see just below Kingdom Road and going all the way down to Mines Road. And you really need to evaluate the impact the trail and the roads have, ecologically. How can we actually quantify this? For the most part, this trail was put in before my tenure, probably around 2002 or 2003. We've owned some component of the property since 1988. And I think our last parcel of this group came in 2006. So it's got a long history. And, whether or not the folks who put the trail in initially looked at the ecological component and what the trail would do to this, I have no idea. But, looking at that, part of our evaluation is, what is the carrying capacity of the property as it relates to trail use? And by that I mean how, I guess, the human interaction on the trail. When I think about carrying capacity a lot, I always envision the photo of the Chilkoot Pass in Alaska, the Klondike Gold Rush, and just a stream of users going nonstop up this trail. We certainly have that here on the peninsula, but we can look at how visitor experience and limits of acceptable change factor into resource protection here on different parcels. Those 3 concepts, carrying capacity, limit of acceptable change, and then also visitor experience and resource protection, are concepts that can be addressed by satisfying, different principles of, developing a good trail. And, as you can see here on the screen, we've got interest, safety, sustainability, and harmony, all principal features. Interest is pretty easy. Where are you going? What are you going to see? Is that going to make a trail? Is it a destination point? Is it something that you're seeing along the trail and not your final destination point? We have to look at safety when we're constructing a trail and thinking about it. Are there dangers? Are there bluffs in the area? Slippery surfaces, poison ivy. How can we make the trail comfortable for a wide variety of users? Can we limit the chance of rolling an ankle, or make the trail pretty visible along its length? And is it signed fairly well? You have to think of the users, and what we've been developing lately is we have to think of accessibility as well. So sustainability is probably the main key feature in determining carrying capacity, limits of acceptable change, and resource protection. And these are going to vary depending on the organization. Blue Hill, it all starts with parking access. Most of our parking areas are small, so that's going to limit the access for people to get out on the trails, and it will spread that user and visitor experience out over time. Now, harmony is, in my interpretation, equal to visitor experience and leave no trace ethic. It includes noise levels, controlling pets, sharing the space with others, keeping the trail footprint as narrow as you can. In time, it will undoubtedly expand with individuals bypassing sections that develop, or creating access along a stream, or photographing, a beautiful section of flowers or boulders off trail. Trails are going to expand over time. So messaging and signage often works, and the key is not to degrade the visitor experience, by spacing out trailblazes and keeping on trail signage at a minimum. Certainly you can build a trail pretty much anywhere you want. The real question is, should you? And we ask ourselves this, and how does it affect the ecological component of the land all the time? When we decide to build a trail, we try and make it fit seamlessly within the environment. And I told you it was going to be short and sweet. I'm all done with my presentation, so I'll pass it on to the torch on to Sandy to talk about our stewardship and management responsibilities on some of our larger forested parcels.
Thanks, George. Nice job. Hi, everyone. As George said, I'm Sandy Walczyk. I'm the either forest conservation manager or conservation forest manager. I can honestly never remember which one I actually am. But Chrissy is going to share my slides for me. I was having a little technological problems, so she's going to share them, and I'll just sort of direct her. So this might be a little bit disconjoined. Apologies for that. And one other thing is that I don't have great connection where I am. I may have to turn off my visual of me, but hopefully you'll be able to hear me. If you can't, or if I break up a lot, please let me know and I'll try to do something. Okay, conservation forest manager, that's what I wrote, so that's what we'll go with right now. I have been with BHHT for about 3.5 years. I was hired after they purchased roughly 40, well, sort of right before and then right after I was hired. We purchased 4,500 acres worth of previously industrial forest land, our Surrey Forest and Meadowbrook properties. We also have a handful of other large properties, like the Kingdom Woods property that George mentioned, that we could look at stewardship on a different level. There's looking at your 10-acre woodlot or our 10-acre parcels or one thing, but then looking over the landscape at thousands of acres, it sort of becomes a different animal, thinking about just stewardship and management and how to interact with these properties and how the properties interact with the community, and all that sort of becomes a bigger, different question when you're dealing with a larger land base. So you go on, Chrissy. So one of the most important things when I'm thinking about how we manage our properties and what to do with them is sort of just figuring out what we have out there, making maps of things. And, again, I am a licensed forester, I'm a forest manager, but honestly, my role for BHHT is as much sort of land stewardship manager as forester. We do intend to manage our forests, but we also have a lot of other properties that aren't forest to consider. But for all of their large properties, and especially our forested properties, the first important thing is to get an idea of what's out there on landscape. And fortunately, we have access to a huge trove of mapping technology now, that just gets better and better every year. And so this example I have is our Meadowbrook property, and the layers of maps behind it are all free data that's available through the state and other resources that can show us, soils and topography, wildlife habitat, any endangered or threatened species, wetlands, shoreline zoning, and these are just an example. So this kind of data is available for all of our properties. And so in my role, what I'm trying to do to get an idea of what's on the ground, one of the most important first steps is to make maps, to look at what we have and use the data out there that's available for us. So that's a really important part of managing things on a large scale. We're currently working right now on a larger scale mapping project where we're looking at sort of the resources available around the whole peninsula and how those relate to each other, and the relationships between our properties and this large vision of our properties on the greater landscape. And so all of that mapping is really important for all of that. Okay, Chrissy. Yeah, so once we have maps of our properties and we have a good idea of what's going on, another important tool for gathering information about our properties is on the ground data collection. And so a large part of what we've done in the forests, and the picture on the left here is one of our permanent forest inventory plots. And so we are putting in, these are sort of fixed area plots. And as you can, I don't know if you can see it very well, but there are trees in those plots and they're all numbered and marked and they all have a tag on them. And we're going to remeasure those exact same trees every 5 years so that we can really tell what's going on across the landscape as far as growth and development of our trees and what impact that any of our management might have on these properties. We've also done larger scale inventories of the whole property to get an idea of what's going on around the whole property for our forested properties. And really for any management that we have going forward, we really want it to be thought out, deliberate, careful. Forest management, a lot of people look at logging and forest, any kind of harvesting, and it just seems like it can always be bad. But it can be very good and very beneficial for the forest, but you really have to plan ahead. You have to know what resources you have. And so we are right now been gathering the data and information to figure out what we have across the landscape. So that's a big part of what I've been working on the last couple of years. Another thing that we've been gathering data on is some of our wetlands. We had grant resources available to do some wetland remediation work. And as part of that project, we've been gathering data annually on our wetland, the progress of those wetlands and species composition. So that picture on the right is some of our interns that were gathering data this summer out in our rehabilitated wetland. So yeah, data gathering we are very lucky that we as an organization have the resources to be able to do it. It's one of those things that a lot of smaller land trusts or land trusts that might not have the ability to do, because it is time and labor intensive, it's resource intensive, but it can be so important for any kind of scientific management of a resource. Okay. And we've also been lucky, this is a little bit of a side note, but not really. We've also been really lucky to invite, and we've had interest from outside researchers to do research on our properties. So I meant to look up, the picture on the left is part of a project from the Swedish Research Institute that is a climate change experiment looking at tree growth and development of planted seedlings on our properties. And I meant to look up the name of the researcher on the right, and I forgot to do it. I believe he's from Northwestern University, but I can get those details if you're interested. And he is doing another climate change experiment where he's looking at a specific variant of a plant species that is growing on one of our properties, and he's looking at it all around New England. And so we get requests from researchers to do this kind of work on our properties, which it helps us to get a little more information, and we hope that it contributes to the greater sort of footprint of research in the area. So once we have data gathered on all of our things, this is the only graph in this presentation, so don't worry. I just wanted to give you an example of the information we can get from, everything, all the data that we're gathering. And so this is a chart that's showing the volume of tree species by their diameter, across the landscape. So the species and size of trees across the landscape. And as a forester, I can look at this information. It tells me a ton about how this forest looks and how it developed and how it's going to grow and how we might manage it. So we gather the data, and then we can create charts and graphs and information like this to help us with management in the future. Okay. Another big part of managing these large landscapes and sort of management that folks might not think about when they're thinking about natural resources is road management, but all the sort of nuts and bolts of managing a property. And I have slides about road management in here, but I'm also thinking about boundary line maintenance, just other things that are pretty, they're not, and I apologize to George because he's a surveyor, but they're not necessarily exciting, but they're just sort of the nuts and bolts things that you have to really put a lot of time and attention into when you're thinking about managing properties on a large scale. So the one that we've been dealing with a lot on the properties I work on are roads. We have about 20 miles of woods roads. And so issues like bridges, we've had to replace a lot of these old broken bridges. With the bridge on the left is a picture of a new bridge, excuse me. And when we're doing any kind of water crossing, we're looking at safety and utility, but we're also looking at fish passage and habitat health and trying to replace smaller culverts or undersized culverts with open bottom culverts or arch culverts or ideally bridges to improve and repair fish habitat. And so, but it's a big expense. We're only able to do it a little bit at a time. And it's sort of ongoing road maintenance. Chrissy, if you continue. There's a lot of other ongoing road maintenance issues that we have. Just having dirt roads is hard in general. The ones that we inherited on these properties were not well maintained, so that requires a lot of extra work to get them back up to snuff. Anybody that's been out to Surrey Forest in the last couple of years has probably taken note of our ongoing disagreement with the beaver. We're working very hard to reach some sort of I would say agreement, but to design some sort of system where the beaver can be there and we can still use the roads and we can coexist. We haven't gotten there yet, but we are continuing to work on it. And again, that's a huge a huge investment of time and energy from the organization just to deal with crossings in a couple of areas. And there are places on these properties where we are letting the old roads go away, but roads are a really great access for management and recreation, and they're definitely in our key areas we are trying to maintain them as well as we can. Okay, Chrissy? This is just more road maintenance, brushing back roads. Again, it's just it's a big expensive investment to have roads, and most large properties around here that are, you know, a couple hundred acres are larger, have some kind of road network, you know, which again, you don't have to maintain it, but they can be very useful. Okay. Thinking about roads, another issue to deal with as a large landowner and thinking about large stewardship is access. It becomes sort of more of an issue when you have roads that people can drive a car or a four-wheeler or something like that onto. These are just images of some of our interns from last summer. On the left, installing a gate, and there's another gate on our Meadow property. And so, you know, access is one of those issues that can be tricky logistically and like physically to like install gates and stuff, but it's also a really complex issue for the organization to figure out where are we worried about restricting access and why, and what kind of recreation are we happy to have in our properties and what aren't we, and where are we going to allow, you know, hunters, how are we going to provide access for folks that have mobility issues, you know, where does it make sense that we let snowmobiles but not four-wheelers? And there's a lot of big issues that the organization has had to think about as we've had these properties that are sort of used by a wide variety of people and that have more roaded access and that sort of thing. Okay. Another big issue that we think about is things like invasive species around the landscape and just managing for the overall health of our properties. And there's a lot of examples of this kind of thing, but invasive species is a good one where we go out, we survey the properties, we make note of where the invasive species are. We as an organization have developed invasive species management plans and consulted with the state to figure out the best way to address all of these issues. And so it's a big, just big issues that can be, again, they're not really exciting issues. It's not exciting to go spend days cutting out, false spirea, but it's important to do it as an organization, especially for us. We don't have any huge infestations of invasives on our properties, and we want to keep it that way. So it's important that we catch them when they're small and then we address them, as we can. Okay. That's just a picture of a giant bittersweet plant that fortunately we've hopefully been able to deal with. And we'll just, we worked on it last year, and we're just going to have to keep an eye on it to make sure that we are getting rid of it. So, okay. Another thing that I wanted to address is that BHHT as an organization we're not just, forest land owners. We do a lot of acreage of, say, blueberry fields. And that's been a big one for us to both like culturally and ecologically to figure out how to manage these areas that mean a lot to people. So it means a lot to people that we keep them open, but that we are using organic practices. And a lot of the blueberry land that we acquire is sort of less than ideal blueberry land. So it's hard you can't usually just drive a tractor over it and mow it. This is our Caterpillar Hill field, which I don't know if folks were around last spring. You might have seen that we burned it I say we burned it with their help, but more they burned it with our help. The Blue Hill and the Sedgwick Fire Department with assistance from the Blue Hill Fire Department. And George and I were standing there. So, but blueberry management has been a big issue for us as well, and figuring out how to do that and how to do it in a way that, maintains the character of the land, and what land do we keep in fields and what land do we let revert to forest, as all fields want to do around here if you don't actively manage them. It's just one of those other big issues that's important to us to think about as a land trust on so many levels. Okay, Chrissy. And along with the challenges of having these large properties, there's also a lot of opportunities and things that we've done that really, having large land bases has let us do and let us think about. We have a native plant nursery on one of our properties where we're growing native trees and shrubs to donate them to local schools and community groups and organizations like that. So that's been a really great endeavor. We have also been thinking about the resources available on our properties and working to, on our forested properties that have been sort of degraded by extractive logging, thinking about how we can improve the biodiversity of the understory and also provide more food resources, both for wildlife and for humans. We've been working with a lot of really interesting groups to figure out a way to get people involved on the landscape. And so we have had huge volunteer efforts to plant out native species, but species that are absent from the landscape on some of these properties. And so that's been a really great opportunity from owning these larger areas. Okay. And one other really great opportunity and something that I'm excited about is being able to sort of use some of the resources, sort of make things full circle. So once we do start a little bit more intensive forest management, and we hopefully will be able to do more of what you can see in these pictures. So we have we were very generously donated a wood miser sawmill, and these are some logs that are actually from Meadowbrook Forest that were left from there was an old harvest, and they just left a bunch of cedar logs laying around that we were able to salvage and saw up and make some lumber out of that we've been using for building. And we hope to do more of that, just to kind of work on the cycle of having this land, we're conserving it, but we're using it, and we're taking these resources and putting them back onto the land, and hopefully involving the community in all of our work. So these big properties just give us, it is really a community resource. And so we're just trying to figure out the best ways to protect these properties, make them ecologically as healthy as possible, and to engage the community in all of the resources that are available on these properties. So I think we're making a lot of progress, considering we've only been owned land at this scale for a couple of years. I wanted to just briefly touch on climate change. I think there might be a little bit discussion of that further, and I don't have any further slides on that. But just to speak on the fact that we right now, I mean, since I've started with BHHT, honestly, and I know it's more in the public eye in the last couple of years, but we manage, with the health of the landscape always in mind, but climate change is always, whatever decisions we make, whatever thoughts we have, thinking about the forest health, invasive insects, how we're gonna, anything from roads to wood harvesting to designing trails is all done with climate change, in the forefront, where it's always on our minds as we think of these resources. And so to me, it's not a separate issue of, oh, we're gonna do this and then manage for climate change. We're managing for all of this with through the lens of climate change and ecological health, and it's sort of always integrated into what we're doing. I just wanted to mention that. Yeah. And I think there's one more slide. Is there one more slide? Oh yes, that's just the happiest cut tree I ever saw. Just thank you very much. I'm happy to answer questions at the end if necessary.
Go for it, Alex.
Oh, great. Thanks. That was awesome. I'm really jealous that you have a wood miser. Not gonna lie.
You can come borrow it whenever you need.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, it's a great idea. It's awesome to see you all doing that. Let's see here. Sorry, let me share my screen. Okay, so my name is Alex Drenga, and I'm the Stewardship Director at Island Heritage Trust. I've been at IHT for about a year now, and still learning, still learning every day. I don't expect that to change. I'm gonna give you a little bit of a background about IHT, if I can. So Island Heritage Trust is a nationally accredited nonprofit land trust dedicated to conservation that provides significant open space and scenic areas, natural resources, and history and culture of the Isle community. We contribute to the well-being of the island by conserving its distinctive landscapes and natural resources, by maintaining public access to valued trails, shoreline, and islands, and by providing educational programming for all ages. IHT was founded in 1987 by citizens concerned about protecting Deer Isle from development pressure that threatened to cut off residents from the shore and traditional uses of the land. We've taken ownership of 18 properties ranging from a lighthouse off Stonington to an old quarry. We now own 25 preserves, 11 of which are open to public use. We co-manage another 4 preserves with the Nature Conservancy, Maine Bureau of Public Parks and Lands, and the town of Stonington. We also protect 21 offshore islands, 8 of which are open for public use. We hold 38 conservation easements, many of them with shore frontage. And all in all, we protect over 1,500 acres of land and over 21 miles of shoreline. We own 2 public beaches and several properties dedicated to clammer access. We permit clamming, fishing, and hunting with care on our preserves, in season, of course. And we promote a leave no trace ethic and encourage visitors to leave what you find as it is. The use of our land for traditional use as gathering and foraging is encouraged. And we're obviously environmentally focused, but we understand the need to diversify our lands to support the local economy and the historical and cultural aspects of the island. We're very fortunate. We now have a year-round staff of 5, which is able to meet the increasing demands of effectively stewarding our land, which contributes to the well-being of the community. I wish I could get this to work. So here's some of the factors that are affecting our shoreline and islands from climatic changes. So I'm sure most of you, living here, I've only been up here for 5 years now. So if I ask my neighbor who's been a lifer, he'd probably tell me that there's even more change that he's seen. But even in my time here, I've noticed more significant storms and coastal flooding. When I first moved up here, it was like something to go see, go out to Schoodic and you'd see these extreme waves, and it was really, a fun thing to go check out. But now I drive over the causeway going to work down in Deer Isle, and sometimes I'm driving through water. So it's definitely real, and it's definitely something that we're all going to be dealing with in the future here. So climatic changes like sea level rise and rising temperatures pose a serious threat to coastal life around the world. Consequences of climatic changes include increased intensity of storms and storm surges, more frequent flooding, and damage to coastal areas. Many cases, the coast is where large population centers are located, in addition to fragile wildlife habitats. So people and wildlife may become displaced, and we need to be prepared for that. Even life further inland is threatened because rising seas can contaminate soil and groundwater with salt. That's something for us to consider on our island. Predicting how high the sea levels will rise is difficult, and projections vary, but it's an issue that must be carefully monitored so we can be prepared for the consequences. A topic that sometimes is overlooked is water resource protection throughout the interior of the main island, and other main islands too, but Deer Isle especially. We're focused on Deer Isle's watersheds and dedicated to protecting as much as we can. In general, water is finite, but on an island, it winds up being equally as important as shorelines. So yeah, some of the changes, from storm surges and flooding, you see a lot of erosion on our preserves, damage to coastal area, displacement, less resilient shoreland, and then threat to critical systems, like public water supplies, even fishing wharfs, and just general infrastructure down on the island and along the coast. So how can land trust plan for the future? We want to be a part of the solution and act as a problem solver. So these are complex issues, and unfortunately, there's not an easy or immediate solution. These climatic changes will continue, and we need to be able to adapt as time goes by. Land trusts look at many factors that impact the health of coastal ecosystems in the community. We all want to be a part of the solution. I'm sure many of you who turned into this webinar have seen changes over time and have witnessed different mitigation strategies for erosion and sea level rise, some successful and some less so. We believe that a land trust role includes becoming a part of the solution, and that is only done through problem solving. We use scientific research, new tools, and available funding to combat climatic changes. IHT focuses on managing our own properties. The 21 miles of shoreline is a lot to manage. It could be overwhelming. But the good thing is that a large number like that could end up being very impactful for the community. And the conversations that we have as a group are thoughtful and ever-changing based on the knowledge that is gained from these new tools and the new scientific research that we find. We're also fortunate that there's a large land trust network here in Maine. So the more we learn, the healthier our shorelands will be. So how can we utilize tools for decision-making? I took this off of the Deer Isle Town website. They actually have a really great resource. If any of you are looking for different types of maps and interactive, tools. So for instance, like the flood zone map, if you're interested to see how, a flood could impact an area in Blue Hill or even down east further or whatever, you can go on this website, that Deer Isle town, and access all this great information. I used to scramble all around trying to find all these different maps, and then I realized that they're all in one spot thanks to Jim Fisher. So credit goes to him to having that there for us. So there's a lot of tools available for us to use to make proper decisions. The town of Deer Isle has a great page. Other tools like TNC's beginning with Habitat Map Viewer provides an online adaptation of TNC's extensive collection of natural resource information. They gather information from government agencies, other nonprofits, into one big collection. And it's really great. I like to use this as a resource for conservation and connectivity planning specifically. And a lot of these resources are interactive, so I encourage you to check them out yourself. The next slide, you'll see how we use the Maine flood hazard map to see the impact of major weather events and storm surges on Shore Acres Preserve specifically. It seems simple. A big storm is going to impact the coast. We have trails that are along the shore, which is great. But we can use this to make plans to reroute trail systems and visualize the future of our preserve. Listening to George earlier was great. Got some good ideas from him, and looking for planning for the future is our priority down on the island right now. So we're fortunate that we're able to use all these tools right now to the best of our ability. And so I'm big on community, and I think when we're looking at how land trusts can plan for the future with climatic changes, we consider community impact. And the best way to be productive is creating partnerships and working together. So beyond our properties, IHT believes it is important to work with other like-minded organizations in the community and beyond, creating strong partnerships with our local community, other land trusts like Maine Coast Heritage Trust, and non-governmental organizations, state and federal government agencies is the only way to make a strong impact. I plan on utilizing a wood miser with our other local land trust at some point here. So as sea levels rise, especially on Deer Island surrounding area, stress is being put on our infrastructure. So in the coming years, roads, causeways, and bridges will be inundated by climatic changes. These are expensive projects, but the longer we wait, the pricier they become. By being proactive, we have the opportunity to challenge these changes. An example of this, community impact and creating partnerships is a community workshop that a group of us will be attending tomorrow through Resilient Works. Resilient Works is a climate resilient consulting group, and they're going to be providing us information so the community can come together for a climate action grant. I'm sure that there's probably a group in Blue Hill doing the same thing, and Stonington is also doing something right now. So there's money out there. It just takes a community effort and a bunch of like-minded people to put the work together. Other groups like Peninsula Tomorrow do great work. So, I encourage you to get involved in a local group if you're interested. Even if you're just here in the summer, you can make an impact in the winter wherever you are, hanging out right now. But that's kind of what I've been learning as I've been going through this is, we can only do so much as a local land trust, but as our network grows, we can make a stronger impact. So how can land trust plan for the future for mitigation strategies on erosion? So natural buffers versus traditional restoration projects. Mitigation strategies for erosion depend on the project and goals. In some cases, a traditional restoration project may be best practice. I'm going to show you a picture right now of Sand Beach down in Stonington. So this is, I actually took this picture yesterday. You could see the cut of Sand Beach is getting pretty extreme here. On the left side, there was actually a hole under one of the trees. You could like peek through it. And, maybe in a situation like this, a traditional riprap situation would be useful. But they can be very expensive and they're not resilient. In the past, riprap was a common way to battle sea level rise, but I don't consider it a restoration project really. Creating a rock buffer does not replace the native shoreline. That being said, it can still be useful in the right situation, and it might be the only project that you could do at a place like this. But other examples of traditional restoration projects include turbidity barriers, geotextiles, and soil nails. Another thing against traditional restoration projects is they're generally really expensive, and there's usually a negative impact on the environment, bringing in machines and whatnot. But the new buzz around erosion is living shoreline projects. Instead of building a seawall, we can start rehabilitating the shoreline to shore up some of the erosion and bring back some of the natural sediment. Martha Bell, and she's our education director. She and the sixth graders at Deer Isle Stonington Elementary School started a living shoreline restoration project almost 10 years ago at Causeway Beach. And that's a picture on the right. Each year, the sixth grade class, that comes in inherits this project and continues its success and the legacy of the project. I see it as a really valuable teaching tool for the kids. It generates excitement, it gives them ownership of the land, and has protected a beach that our community highly values. So, that one checks all the boxes as far as, helping out the community and creating partnerships. So, kudos to Martha for that one. That one's a really good one. That's a great example. I'm glad we had that for this presentation. So resource protection, how can we protect our resources here in the future? So there's many management strategies to protect our natural resources. One relevant example is found in our seaweed policy. So I'll give Ann Hook credit for this one because I kind of just took this right from the archives. And I'll just tell you what our policy is. So collection of washed up seaweed on our beaches for gardening and other uses is a traditional activity long enjoyed by island residents. I'm sure a lot of you go and pick it up and put it in your garden in the wintertime. So as part of our mission to support the traditional natural resource based pursuits in our region, IHT supports collection, only done within state regulations on its properties. And we long pursued efforts to ensure greater public access to these shorelines so that people would have these opportunities. So it's kind of, trying to figure out how to strike a balance between being ecologically minded and then also supporting the community. I would actually maybe think of it almost as like the blueberry fields that you guys were talking about earlier. We want to have that cultural heritage here in the area and keep our blueberry fields, intact if possible. But maybe that wouldn't be the best, management plan had they not been blueberries in the past. But anyways, IHT prohibits intertidal harvesting, so the cutting of living rockweed is not allowed. And this is kind of a hot button issue, so it's an interesting one to bring up. The reason that we don't want people cutting the rockweed is rockweed forests form a significant habitat and nursery ground for dozens of species of marine vertebrates and invertebrates like lobsters and urchins, snails, and fish. Rockweed plants filter, accumulate, and recycle nearshore pollutants. Its removal by harvesting has a dramatic effect, which may take many years to recover because rockweed is a slow-growing perennial plant. The adverse effects impinge on other traditional island occupations such as lobstering, clamming, and fishing. So I would, there's actually been some research done by UMO that cutting isn't the worst thing that you can do, but you have to do it in the right way. So if you cut from 15 inches higher, it regenerates rather quickly and it doesn't have as much negative of an impact, but something along the lines of 7 inches and, algae and anything that has been living under that rockweed will perish within like a week. It's a pretty wild stat. But just like anything in this field, there's ongoing research, and as we learn more, we make our decisions based on that. So it's pretty fluid. And if anybody knows me, I'm big on education. If I'm invited to another one of these, my last slide will probably also be this. So always educate. The natural world provides us with a lens to be patient, which I think is really important in when we live in it's kind of like an instant gratification lifestyle these days. I won't dive in too deep to it, but again, Martha Bell, and she partners with our school down on the island. And great change comes from inspiring the youth. And I think that we're fortunate that we have a great program that's powerful. And, a lot of the people that we work with or the students down there really love the education component of IHT. So, the more we can do that, the more we can get the people that are going to be in power soon to understand that climatic changes are actually affecting us and affecting the rest of their families, the better off that we'll be. So that's all I got. Thanks a lot. And I'll take questions with everybody else.
That's great. Thank you so much, Alex. And thanks, Sandy and George. I think one of the things that I had hoped would come from this that certainly has is to show people sort of how connected all the work at land trusts are. And there was a big emphasis today on sort of the educational components and working in the communities, which is generally seen as the outreach coordinator's purview. But in fact, our stewardship team are doing a lot of education work on a daily basis out in the communities with school groups, by doing things like this. So, and working really closely with our outreach teams to help sort of spread the messages of good stewardship practices on the land. So I think that that's really terrific. Lisa, do we have any questions in the chat that we should jump into?
Not too many today. There is one question, which I think was during Sandy's presentation, but I think Alex has experience too. What is your technique for getting rid of bittersweet?
Yeah, so that's actually a good question, and it's one that we as a land trust wrestled with for a long time. So we use herbicides for bittersweet. We hired a licensed herbicide applicator for that procedure. Of all of the invasives on our properties, bittersweet is the only one that we have used herbicides on. We generally use manual removal. So everything else, we're out there cutting back on a yearly basis as needed. But bittersweet, just because of how very quickly it spreads, how pervasive it is, and because where it was located in our forests, it had the potential to be a very large problem very quickly. We did hire an herbicide applicator for that, which was, it was a big decision, and it required our organization to create a policy around herbicide use and to really think about it, to get expert advice from the state, and then again to go out and hire a licensed professional who had all the requirements. It required us to put up signage and shut part of our trails for a while, so it wasn't a decision that we made lightly, for sure.
Yeah. Let's see. There was a question about managing the Great Meadow down the road from the salt pond, which George answered. He said, we haven't mowed this summer and that will be the first year to do so.
One question that just popped up was asking about any conversations that we're having with Wabanaki tribal members. And I can say a little bit about that, and Sandy and George and Alex can jump in too. But for Blue Hill Heritage Trust, it's actually a part of our current strategic plan to spend time really learning more from our Wabanaki community members for whom this is their homeland. And we have some ongoing projects with a few tribal members right now, which is really exciting, about helping with some restoration work in some of our larger forest lands. Sandy, do you want to speak to that briefly?
Sure, yeah. And again, this is just projects that we're just starting, but yeah, we've been really fortunate to, and I don't even honestly know how we'd been part of the First Light learning journey, and sort of out of relationships built through that came this project opportunity where we are, I'd mentioned it before, that we are in some of our forest properties, we're looking to both increase biodiversity, but also to increase plant resources for human use, for human consumption, and to sort of really work with the Wabanaki, the tribal members that we are working with, to start to understand the land in a different way. It's been a really amazing sort of learning experience for us as an organization and for some of our volunteers. And it is in the beginning stages, but we do have further plans to work to bring different plants back onto the landscape and to create education around those plants and what they mean to Native peoples, and to sort of use it as both a way to actually put those foods and plants on the landscape, but especially for education and outreach, and opening up those lands, hopefully allowing Native peoples to feel welcome and at home back on these lands that they haven't had access to for a while, in whatever that means. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, we are hopeful to be involved with First Light, which is a program with Wabanaki people, and I'm really excited. I hope that we can start working with them and creating a partnership, and allowing an indigenous use on our islands and on our properties. More than anything, I'm excited to learn their ways and hopefully have a better understanding of how we can make better change for that. But yeah, there's a really great program. I guess my predecessor signed up for it with our executive director, but I don't want to use COVID as an excuse for everything, but basically it squashed it. So hopefully when it starts up again, we'll be involved.
Absolutely. There was a quick follow-up question, Sandy, about how the herbicide was used at Surrey Forest, whether it was a spray or a stump application.
Yeah, there was both was used. So the infestation was too big to just do stump. We'd wanted to do that. We'd preferred it, but it wound up being too big. And so he did the stump application where he could. There's two different chemicals used. One of them, I think, was just, Roundup, or, but I can't remember the other one. But yeah, both were used, but it was done. And by spraying, it's a small backpack sprayer and done, inches away from the plant material. That this is not like large scale spraying by any means. So it was as controlled as we could make it.
There's two more plant questions. Preferred native plants that you like to plant, and any problems with bishop's weed yet? And if so, any solution? And I guess that's Sandy and or Alex.
Yeah, I mean, the native plants one is hard. It sort of depends what and why. A lot of what we have been planting out are a lot of things that have some kind of edible component to that, either for wildlife and or for humans. A lot of like viburnums or nut-bearing trees or small shrubs. Sort of anything that has, an edible component to it, chokeberries, native cherry species, just a host of things that have some kind of edible component. But it really depends what you want and what you're doing it for and all that kind of stuff. And no bishop's weed, as far as I know. That doesn't mean it's not there. It's where we've had, fortunately, as probably I'm assuming folks might know, where you usually have invasives is not in the middle of the woods, miles away from anywhere. It's along roads, it's along trails, it's next to yards. So those are the places that we try to keep an eye on, and it's just, we monitor annually, but yeah, stuff does go under the radar, but so far I have not seen any of that in our properties. But.
Yeah, nothing that I'm aware of yet either. Hopefully it stays that way. And same as far as the native plants, I get just, edible component or pollinator component really is something that we're looking for.
Alex, somebody was asking a question about the work with the islands and whether you work collaboratively with the Island Institute or the Main Island Trail Association. And they're wondering about who owns Sheep Island, Little Sheep, and the other islands, that thoroughfare.
Oh, sure. My favorite topic being on islands. We work really closely with Mida. Yeah. In fact, we purchased a boat this fall, so we'll be out on the islands quite a bit, and have a better presence on the water, which would be really great. And I talked to Maria Janess from Mida. She's like the regional steward for our area, weekly. We were on the phone earlier today. Doing island cleanups, maintaining the trails. I guess part of having our boat is going to be trying to get some programming out there, but also really stewarding our islands to their fullest potential. And the Island Institute, so I haven't really gotten into that yet. Some of the islands that we own have been transferred from the Island Institute to us. It's something that's on my radar, but I haven't built a relationship with them yet, unfortunately. And then I guess I'd have to ask which Sheep Island. So Little Sheep Island, on the western side of LDI, we own. And then Sheep Island off of Stinson Neck is right now owned by a group of 5 people. And used to have a campsite out there, but there's an eagle's nest, and I think that they went to day use only. But that's a gorgeous island. It's got a bar in between. But that's a property that may be going through transfer to new ownership, but it has a conservation easement. So whoever ends up taking on ownership, it's not going to change the management practices, and it'll still be open for public use, which is great. Was there another island that I can't go through all of them. There's way too many of them.
Yeah, that's all right.
But if you want, you can email me, and I can give you information on ownership if you're interested. Whoever asked that question, just shoot me an email.
George, I'm going to throw one to you. Somebody was asking if you could speak a little more about accessibility issues and what the plans are for the future of that.
Well, this coming year, we're planning on working on 2 accessible trails, one at Caterpillar Hill through the upper portion of the Blueberry Field, and then also a section of 100 Acre Woods where we are converting the current trail into a more accessible section. I think in time we'll do a full loop around the wetland complex that's there. It's a man-made wetland complex, so we don't really have any big issues with permitting for it, but we will try to make the impact as low as we can. But I think initially phase 1 for 100 Acre Woods is going to be about a 900-foot section of essentially Acadia type mix, Park Service mix, make it very stable, similar to what we have at behind the Congregational Church, leading to, Parker Point South Street Trail. Most of our accessible trails to date, other than the church, have been utilizing wooden steps, very, very low riser heights. The particular one I'm thinking about is Parker Point South Street Trail, but a lot of these trails, it costs bigger dollars than to just cut something through the pucker brush and having a soil tread for the trail. So we look to find grants for those larger scale projects, and we've been successful here in the last few years in doing so. And and donors, they help out too. So it's a big aspect of what we're looking to do this year in increasing our diversity, equity, and inclusion, mainly on the trails and getting people out where they haven't been able to in the past. So we're having a big push for that this year. And both Island Heritage Trust and Blue Hill Heritage Trust have put in a proposal for this, this at the Land Trust Alliance conference this fall in New Orleans. So hopefully we'll be able to describe what we've learned through the process and how we can make things a little bit easier for that section of the population to get out and see what a lot of people have already seen. So
I'm going to address, Dave had a question about the rockweed thing real quick. I just saw so IHT does not allow harvesting. So just to clarify that for you.
Great, thank you.
And then Philip actually asked another question about Native peoples. So we have a sign on Sunshine Road that marks the carrying place. Enhanced informational signs at an area like that would be really great. There's actually an indigenous canoe route that we have a map of, and I would love to do something, some sort of partnership, and have Wabanaki people come down and actually do the canoe route as a group, get a bunch of people out there on canoes and do something like that. I think that would be a great outreach goal for IHT at some point here. But yeah, more informational signage would be great. I guess we have like one sign that just says Indian carrying place, and it's something, but it's not really enough, I guess.
One question somebody asked about whether we've, at least IHT and Blue Hill Heritage Trust, have thought about allowing or disallowing trail bikes, trail biking trails. And, for us, we've looked at it, and just that shared use space is really tough with some of the trails we currently have. And since we have both Meadowbrook and Surrey Forest, larger areas with at least miles of trails, potential trails and riding capabilities than some of our other preserves, we've left it to have use out at those two locations. So Sandy, you were.
Oh, I mean, yes, yeah, just that we have talked a little bit with some folks who are interested in like building mountain biking trails at Meadowbrook or something like that. And we are not we are not uninterested in working with the group. It's just that is certainly the sort of thing that requires outside expertise and expense and a lot of maintenance. And so, we as an organization, I can't see us going out of our way to do that kind of work, but, we are open to the possibility of that, led by another organization, but it would require a lot of, commitment on someone else's part, more or less. Yeah.
Right. I think that covers all the questions, right?
I think so. Yeah, that was perfect timing.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, folks know how to find these stewardship friends of ours at either Island Heritage Trust or Blue Hill Heritage Trust. If after this webinar you leave and you have another question, please feel free to reach out. We're always here to answer your questions, and this is a huge job, and it's a critical component of conservation work. And as you can tell, it is not just about trails. There's so much more that goes into it, and we didn't even get into easement monitoring. There's so much more that happens with these folks, and they work hard, and we all owe them a huge debt of gratitude for the work that they're doing to help really protect these places and keep them beautiful, and be really thinking about the future and the resiliency of our communities and our landscape. So thanks to the three of you very much. Lisa, any closing thoughts?
No, I just absolutely agree. I think you said it all.
Terrific. Well, thanks very much, everybody. And this recording will be up if you want to share it with your friends and family. And of course, I really encourage you to support our two land trusts. You can find donation buttons on our website, on our Facebook pages. We cannot do this work without you and your help. And thanks to so many of our donors that I know I've seen on here tonight, and our volunteers who we are just hugely grateful for as well. So have a great night, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.